People feared the city at night, not because of the darkness, but because darkness belonged to men like Davies and Tross. By the time they were 28, their names had already become legends whispered in underground casinos, smoke-filled bars, and back alleys stained with blood. One belonged to the Black Ravens, the other to the Crimson Vipers. Two syndicates that had been trying to destroy each other for over 20 years. And yet, Davies and Tross had once shared the same pair of shoes. They grew up in the same orphanage near the Harbour District, back when neither of them had enough to eat, enough warmth, or enough hope to survive properly. The orphanage itself looked like it was held together by rainwater and prayer, rusted gates, broken windows, thin blankets during winter. Most kids cried themselves to sleep there. Davies never did. Even as a child, he was frighteningly calm, quiet, sharp-eyed, the type of boy who learned early that emotions could be used against you. Tross was the opposite. Loud, reckless, always laughing even when there was nothing funny, especially then. The first time they met, Davies was sitting alone behind the building with a bruised lip after fighting 3 older boys for stealing bread. Tross sat beside him without asking, then split his own bread in half. "You fight like you want to die," he said. Davies glanced at him coldly. "And you talk too much," Tross grinned. "Good, then we can balance each other out." From that day on, they became inseparable. 2 broken boys trying to survive a world that had already abandoned them. They stole together, ran from police together, got beaten together, and dreamed together. At night, they used to sneak onto the orphanage rooftop and stare at the city lights in silence. "One day," Tross said once, "we're getting out of here." Davies looked down at the streets below. "No matter what." No matter what. Tross held out his fist. Davies stared at it for a second, before bumping it lightly with his own. A promise. Simple as that. Neither of them realized back then how cruel life could become toward promises made by children. Everything changed the year they turned 17. The Harbour District erupted into violence after a failed arms deal between the Ravens and the Vipers. Gunfire swallowed entire neighborhoods. Buildings burned for days. The orphanage got caught in the middle. Davies and Tross came home one evening to find flames crawling across the roof, while people screamed inside. Davies still remembered the heat against his skin as he tried to run in. Tross held him back. "You'll die. There are kids inside." "So are we." That night, the orphanage burned to the ground, and whatever innocence they had left burned with it. Afterward, they survived separately for the first time. Davies was taken in by the Black Ravens after nearly beating a man to death during a street fight. Tross disappeared into the underground fighting rings downtown. By 20, Davies had become the youngest enforcer in Raven history. Cold, efficient, merciless. People said he never missed a shot. Meanwhile, Tross became famous in the Crimson Vipers for entirely different reasons. He smiled while fighting, smiled while bleeding, smiled even with a knife pressed against his throat. Where Davies inspired fear, Tross inspired chaos. The city turned them into monsters in different ways, but somehow, neither of them forgot. Years passed before they saw each other again. It happened during a negotiation between the 2 syndicates at an abandoned nightclub. The tension in the room was suffocating. Guns hidden beneath tables, men watching each other like starving wolves. Then the doors opened. Tross walked in beside the Viper boss. Davies stood across the room beside the Ravens. Silence. For one dangerous second, nobody moved. Then Tross broke into a grin. "Well, damn." Davies stared at him emotionlessly, but slowly, very slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted too. The entire room looked confused, because men like Davies were never supposed to smile. "Still alive?" Tross asked. Unfortunately, Tross laughed loudly, and just like that, it felt like they were 17 again. After the meeting, they met on the rooftop alone. Rain drizzled softly over the city skyline. Tross lit a cigarette and handed one to Davies. "You joined the Ravens. You joined the Vipers." "Yeah." Tross smirked faintly. "Guess we screwed up somewhere." Davies leaned against the railing. Neither spoke for a while. Then Tross said quietly, "You ever think about leaving all this?" Davies looked at the city below. Every scar on his body suddenly felt heavier. "Every day." "But there's no leaving once blood's involved." Tross nodded slowly. Because they both understood, men like them weren't allowed peaceful endings. Still, their friendship survived, secretly, dangerously. Sometimes they met late at night at an old noodle shop near the docks where nobody recognized them. Sometimes they drank whiskey. Together beneath the old harbor bridge, they used to sleep under as children. Back then, they would lie on flattened cardboard boxes and stare at the stars through the rusted steel above them. Tross used to talk endlessly about the future. A stupid little house near the ocean. Cheap beer. An old dog sleeping on the porch. Davies mostly listened. But on colder nights, when Tross fell asleep first, Davies would quietly place his jacket over him before pretending not to care in the morning. Neither of them talked about those memories anymore. Maybe because remembering hurt too much. One winter night, Davies was ambushed after leaving a warehouse deal. 5 gunmen. Close range. No escape. He took 2 bullets before managing to hide inside an abandoned building. Blood soaked through his shirt as footsteps approached outside. Davies loaded the last bullet into his gun. Then the shooting started. Different gunfire. Faster. Wild. Violent. Minutes later, the door burst open. Tross stepped inside covered in blood and smoke. "You look like shit," he said. Davies stared at him. "You followed me," Tross shrugged while helping him stand. "You think I'd let those idiots kill you before I do?" Even half dead, Davies laughed quietly. Because only Tross could joke in moments like that. Later that night, while stitching Davies' wounds inside a filthy apartment, Tross suddenly asked, "If it ever comes down to it, you think we could kill each other?" Rain tapped softly against the windows. Davies stayed silent for a long time, then finally answered, "No." Tross looked at him carefully. "Even for your people." Davies met his eyes. "You're my people." For the first time in years, Tross stopped smiling. Because in their world, those words meant more than love, more than loyalty. It meant, "I would burn everything before I bury you." But peace never lasts in cities built on violence. Rumors spread quietly at first. Someone claimed they saw Davies sitting beside a viper near the harbor. Someone else swore Tross once walked away from a raven ambush without firing a shot. People started watching them, and men in power become paranoid very quickly, especially during war. One night, Tross found the word "rat" carved into his apartment door. Meanwhile, Davies' own boss quietly placed a gun on the table during a meeting and asked, "You hesitate whenever vipers are involved?" Davies answered coldly, "If I wanted to betray you, you'd already be dead." But suspicion never disappeared, because in worlds like theirs, friendship was often more dangerous than hatred. Still, they kept meeting beneath the bridge, 2 tired men pretending the city hadn't already decided their ending. One rainy night, Tross handed Davies a small rusted coin. "You kept this?" Davies asked quietly. Tross smiled faintly. "You gave it to me when we were kids." Davies stared at it silently. He remembered immediately. 2 starving boys outside the orphanage. 1 coin, 1 loaf of bread. Half for you, half for me. Back when survival was simple, back before the city taught them how to become killers. Tross leaned against the railing and looked over the glowing skyline. You know what the saddest part is? Davies stayed quiet. We actually could have had a good life. Rainwater rolled slowly down Tross's face. A little house near the ocean. He laughed softly. Cheap beer. Dumb dog. Davies looked away because suddenly his chest hurt in ways bullets never managed to accomplish. Then Tross stood. I should go. Davies' voice came lower than usual. Tross. Tross paused, and for the first time since they were children. Davies sounded afraid. Don't die before me. Tross smiled sadly. That's the first selfish thing you've ever said. Then he disappeared into the rain, and Davies remained alone beneath the bridge for a very long time, holding a rusted coin in trembling hands. 3 days later, war finally erupted between the Ravens and the Vipers. Full scale, unstoppable. The city drowned in gunfire. Warehouses burned, bodies filled the harbor. And somewhere in the chaos, Tross disappeared. No body was ever found, no funeral, no proof, just gone. Some people said the Ravens killed him. Others believed the Vipers executed him for betrayal.